Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My two guests today are Alexandra Pope and Sjanie HUGO WURLITZER. Rather than go straight into introducing them, I'd like to give you a little bit of background. A friend recommended a book called Wild Power to me back in 2018, and it suggested that you can discover the magic of your menstrual cycle and awaken the path to feminine power. The power bit I was all on board with, but the magic of menstrual cycle? I just thought, are you kidding me? I mean, where is the magic in getting my period? But I set to reading it with an open mind, and what I found genuinely transformed the way I related to myself and my body, and indeed my cycle. A few weeks prior to this recording, I was told about Wise Power, and I tell you, I was super excited. This is a treat. Alexandra and Sjanie understand, profoundly and truly understand what we're all going through with peri to post-menopause. I've joked with girlfriends about idle daydreams of living in my old flat on my own, how tidy it would be, how much fun it would be. We all have. And I've also felt something shift at the very core of my being, but I couldn't quite articulate what it was. Speaking to these two wonderful women and reading Wise Power, I now understand that this is all part of the process and the design of peri to post-menopause. So without further ado, I bring you Alexandra and Sjanie. Alexandra and Sjanie, it is such a joy to meet you, and I'm very excited to get into discussion about both your books and all the work that you've done and that you're doing. First of all, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourselves? Alexandra, would you like to start?
Yes, I'd love to, Hattie. Thank you for that. Well, I am post-menopause now, and I have been deeply involved with the work of teaching on menstrual cycle awareness and the power of the menstrual cycle and menopause. The menstrual cycle as a journey of awakening, as a spiritual practice, as a self-care practice, as a creative process. And I have been unpacking this work for 40 years, I would say now, Hattie. Yes, wow. Mm-hmm. And for about 15 years working very, very closely with Sjanie. So Sjanie and I came together about 15 years ago, and that's really when the work just came together in a whole new way. So basically, for most of my life, I have been interested in the menstrual cycle as this extraordinary healthcare tool, self-care tool. And then from that, this kind of inner guidance tool, an inner coach. But ultimately, the bit that's most interesting for me now is that it holds within it this extraordinary spiritual process and practice. I mean, that's a pretty wild statement, isn't it, to say about the menstrual cycle?
It is. And you know what? I'm going to be completely honest. When I first was introduced to Wild Power, your first book that you wrote together, I did think, well, do you know what? Is this going to be just a little bit too much for me? Is it going to be too spiritual? Because I was very much at a point where I was pretty disconnected from my body, and something as unusual to me at that time as a spiritual understanding of your menstrual cycle, I questioned. And then I got into your book and I was like, oh my goodness, this is phenomenal. It's not too much at all. But Sjanie, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's quite good hearing your story because it sort of makes me appreciate the sort of background and skills that Alexandra and I have and how we've uncovered this work. So I worked as a hypnotherapist and psychotherapist for a number of years. The focus of my work was all around fertility and really the mind-body connection and how we can really know ourselves through our body and communicate with our body in this receptivity and way of listening that can create health and wellness and awaken our creativity and so on. So that was my background. And I've also been very deeply involved in a practice called movement medicine, which is an embodiment practice. And I'm trained as a movement medicine facilitator. And it's that skill set that Alexandra and I have really brought to this work. And it's been very much about listening to people's experiences of the cycle and then bringing those skills of embodiment and connection and deep listening to really unfold what it is that's happening. And I think it's because of that it's so relatable, Hattie, because what we're saying isn't like, it's not sort of sucked from thin air, and it's not disconnected to our modern lives and what it really means to be a woman and all these kinds of things. It is so deeply rooted in the lived experience of those who have a cycle. And for me, I'm 45 at the moment, so I'm still very much in my menstruating years. I've had this academic education on menopause through the process of writing the menopause book, but my work is very, very much still in the practice of menstrual cycle awareness.
I'd love to come in here, Hattie, and just add something for all those people who have shitty experiences with their menstrual cycle, who suffer with pain and so on, that actually the really deep work of uncovering the power of the cycle was initiated for me just before my 31st birthday, when I got the menstrual pain from hell. And it was actually pain. And this pain came back month after month, and it would last for 3 days, sometimes 4 days. I mean, it was endometriosis. It was insane. So I just want to know for everyone listening who suffers that, as Sjanie says, it was not plucked out of thin air. Mm-hmm. It was, drawn out of deeply engaging with the body and deeply engaging with pain. I mean, it was the pain that was the catalyst for going, my body's talking to me. I'm going to listen. There's something here.
See, that's really fascinating as well, because I've actually been fortunate enough through my life for menstruating years. Yeah, I'm 49, so still going, that it's not been a big deal. It's been a nuisance. It's been a little bit irritating, wildly inconvenient. But lots of the women that I speak to, certainly on the podcast, have suffered in a big way. And often that has led to hysterectomy in order to eliminate the pain that they've experienced. And I know there are millions of women who do suffer with their cycle. So knowing that you've had that experience and you're still able to connect spiritually with the whole process, that grounds it even more, as well as all the science and the empathy and the compassion that you have. Which brings me on to Wise Power, your new book. And when I heard about that, I was extremely excited. And now, having gone through in and out and back in and through most of it, but I really want to reread it and start to finish again. It's the compassion and the understanding that stood out the most for me, because one of those undefinable parts of perimenopause is understanding that something's changing, something is shifting. You view the world a little differently. You feel your own body, yourself differently. And you manage to articulate that, as well as put in the science, as well as implement strategies throughout the entire book. So without me whiffling on more about what I think, can you tell us about Wise Power?
I just want to respond to what you said quickly, because I think it's so important that there is this profound change that happens for us in the lead up to menopause and then really during menopause, but it is invisible to the world. And yet it's so strong in us. And a big part of why people suffer is because we feel so alone in our experience. And what you have said about the compassion really touches me, Hattie, because it's true that when our experience is named and acknowledged, to feel okay, to feel normal, to feel understood, to realize actually this is an organic process. This is what's meant to happen. I can just feel the stress falling away from millions of people around the planet. I can almost feel the whole planet going, it's okay. So I'm really glad that you spoke about that piece, because it's one of the sort of accidental and enormous benefits of reading Wise Power is this incredible relief and balm that we feel when we realize how okay we are and how organic and right this is. So yes, I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you, Hattie.
Oh, no, thank you. I mean, the very fact that you start with the vision to hold, that will resonate with, my guess is everybody. millions of women around the world, because imagining what life could be like acknowledged in that way, that's extremely powerful.
It's lovely that you highlight that. Oh gosh, what can I say about this book? This book means more to me than anything I've written to date. And I put out one or two things. It certainly demanded more of me. It demanded more of us, didn't it, Sjanie? It was like we kind of went through a version of menopause again in the writing of the book, being taken to our edges. So, all right, wise power. What has driven us to write this is that menopause is this extraordinary awakening moment. It's a moment of awakening. So we talked about the spiritual path and practice of the menstrual cycle. This is the culmination of it. And how is it being portrayed in the world? As a massive problem. Everyone's suffering hideously. And actually not everyone is, by the way. But I also want to acknowledge it's really good that menopause is being named as a something, and so that people are suffering in silence less now, because at least it's sort of out there. But the message that's coming across is that it's a disaster waiting to happen, that it's kind of the end of your life, and that the rest of your life, you kind of lose status and power. And it's the absolute opposite of that. And we wanted to reinstate the potency and the power of what is at work at menopause, the power that menopause can potentially awaken you to if you are taught, if you like, educated in what is actually going on archetypally, and we're not talking hormones here, although we do acknowledge, your body goes through this huge physical change. And this is, of course, what catapults you into this psycho-spiritual change. But the book is a description of the psychological and the spiritual dynamic that you're undergoing at menopause, and also how you are prepared for that. Because if you're in touch with your cycle in the way that we teach at Red School, practicing what we call menstrual cycle awareness, instead of slamming into menopause and being completely decked by and going, what the, and this is hell and get me out of here, which is, I'd want to, I said, please just fix me, get me out of this hole. Instead of that, we articulate in the book how you are evolved, is the word we use, isn't it, Sjanie? You are evolved into menopause. And this, I have to say, was how I experienced menopause. Because I, of course, have been in touch with my cycle for years at this point. And menopause was not a problem, nor did I go, oh, Jesus, I'm coming into menopause. It was a feeling, or, it wasn't like this. Yes, it wasn't like this problem, or I could feel my being changing. And there was a fascination about that change. And in that change, yes, challenging things were coming up, because in any ending, especially an ending this profound, you are confronted by stuff. You are made vulnerable. So it's a real clear marker that you're getting older, menopause. So, it pulls you up short and you go, shit, what's my life been about? Who am I? Where, all those kind of existential questions are absolutely par for the course. And you really have to examine yourself. And this is part of the evolution that you undergo at menopause, the initiation that you undergo. But I felt myself kind of evolve into it. And interestingly, I felt ready for it. I felt like, what? I'm done with the cycle now. It's done its work. And I could feel something else coming in. And I felt held in something, even as I had to confront certain challenges. I was very confronted by my shadow side, myself, what I'd done, etc., with my life and so on. And I feel that this is our birthright to experience this as a process of feeling like you're stepping into something, that you're ready, that you're stepping into something bigger. So instead of your power collapsing and disappearing, or diminishing now from now on, that actually you feel yourself being expanded into a much more powerful place. And the process you undergo at menopause is your kind of training, I suppose it is, isn't it, Sjanie? Or preparation.
We talk about it as a PhD.
Yes, a PhD in how to handle this power, to take responsibility for it. We can talk more about what we mean by that power later, if you like. But menopause is educating you, if you like, in what needs to happen for you to be able to take care of this new power, this new expansion in you.
We talk about it as a sort of graduation into sovereignty, that the experience of menopause actually graduates you into this new standing in yourself, this new knowing of yourself, this new authority and clarity about your purpose and who you are. And as Alexandra said, and that sets you up then for the second half of your life. It's a new beginning. It's a new beginning.
It's really exciting, Hattie. I mean, I felt like I was sort of newborn, and I have never felt better in my life about myself and what I'm doing than I do now. I have never felt more powerful than I do now, and more creative and more productive. I mean, it's pretty bonkers what we do at Red School. I look at myself and I go, holy shit, am I really doing all this? It's amazing. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and something that we need to be shouting about, because nobody tells you about so much. I mean, I've had no initiation into perimenopause or menopause whatsoever, but nobody tells you about how good it gets, which is surely one of the most important things. And one of the parts of your book, you say, while men gain experience as they age, women apparently lose their power, exactly just as you've been saying, and slip into greater irrelevance, which is, again, something I have heard. Surveys have been done on women feeling invisible. In fact, women become more powerful with age, but it's a power that isn't recognized, which really is basically what you've just been saying. And all of us are sort of waving flags behind you going, yes, I know. So how do we get this message out? Is this changing, and what can we do?
Podcasts like this.
Yeah, I was about to say, you know what we've discovered, Hattie, to be so incredibly powerful is the sharing of stories. From those who have been through menopause and who are on the other side. We've actually got this Wise Power retreat on at the moment, which is where Alexandra's spoken with 7 women about their menopause experience. And I witnessed all those conversations. I was in the virtual room when they were speaking. And it's that just completely changes the playing field for everyone. Hearing how these women are talking about their lives now post-menopause, how they feel about themselves, how they've changed, what they've learned, what their experience is like, the freedom they feel. I feel like hearing these stories is going to it's just going to ripple through our culture. So I think more stories is really important. Yeah, what do you think, Alexandra? What's going to get this message out?
I think, interestingly, it's a message whose time has come.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
I mean, menopause is being spoken about now, which is fabulous. At least it's definitely in the UK, but I'm sure perhaps also in other places too, but very much so. I mean, at the highest level in government, they're talking about it. So this is so radical. So there are now conversations happening. So we've got menopause clearly out there. And when you have one very particular story, which is, oh, it's terrible, go on HRT or whatever, all these terrible symptoms we have. What it does when you have one particular, it polarizes the other. The other story, it's a sort of a scientific thing. You take one thing
out. It illuminates, yeah.
Illuminate something else, So I think in a way, our book is riding a sort of energetic current. There's an energetic momentum in the field now to carry our book out there. And this is what I love particularly about women, is that when they read something that excites them, they share it with others. Yeah. I mean, it's just the best way. And as Sjanie said, listening to stories and just, have you read this book? It's a whole different story here. And there's this lovely energy of excitement passed from person to person, woman to woman, around what it could be. So I think there's a sort of invisible force at work.
True. I mean, women are amazing at spreading news. The shadow side of that is gossip. But the good news is, when there's good news, we're also really good at sharing it.
We get it out there. So, I mean, I do feel we're kind of on a wave, don't you, Sjanie, with something with the book. It's extraordinary. There's so much goodwill coming in around it, which just speaks to me volumes of how this message that we're articulating is attracting something.
Yeah, and people are really ready for it, I think.
Yes, that's actually really important. People can hear it now in a way they couldn't before. It's a good point.
The dismantling and undoing of self as we know it is also part of this understanding that things are changing within us and we have a new view. And for many of us, that's an exciting experience. Just as with the pain that you've experienced, Alexandra, the mental side can be deeply challenging for some women, for many, to a very dark point, in fact, for many. How do you reconcile that for those women who are really suffering and find the mental challenges of peri to post menopause possibly the worst of their symptoms?
The thing about this awakening process at menopause, Hattie, is that all this initiation that you go through into this more expanded consciousness, that's the awakening that's happening. To do that, you've got to go through a dismantling. So it's a kind of psychological death we undergo, where our identities get dismantled and we no longer quite know who we are. And it's that initial part of menopause is the darkest hour. It is that is what makes menopause initiatory and powerful, our capacity to go into that and to go, okay, so this isn't working in my life anymore. I'm over my job. I never want to see my children again, much as I love them, but I'd just like them all to leave home now. Thank you very much. And even your beloved partner, if you're in a relationship, however much you love them, you want space from them, you want out. And actually many relationships do end. So there's, you build an identity. You are a somebody. Your work makes you a somebody. Your relationship makes you a somebody. Being a mother makes you a somebody. And suddenly when all that is dismantled, it's like, oh, wow, who am I? What? And that is scary. Yeah. And the thing is, if we don't understand that this is actually part of the initiation into the expansion that menopause is inviting us into, if we're not prepared for that, then it can be very scary. If someone's listening right now who's really in that place, I urge you to reach out for allies, to get support, get professional support. Do not go it alone with this. I mean, Sjanie mentioned our Wise Power Retreat series, a series of conversations we're having at the moment. There's some very powerful stories in there with people who really went into the dark and really had to question themselves and what they were doing and how they met it and how they came through it. So that's where story. So to be part of a circle of others. And I actually want to say to those of you who feel like you're going mad right now, because that's often a common thing, I say to you, you are not going mad. You're actually coming to your senses. You're seeing things in the way you have never seen them before. So that's the thing about menopause. You have sight. It's suddenly your sight expands and you see stuff you've just put up with for years and never questioned. You question, you go, holy, why am I putting up with this? You suddenly discover your own boundaries in a way you haven't before. So this clarity comes through. You need information, you need allies, you need support.
Yeah, the thing I want to sort of echo there, particularly Alexandra, to anybody who is really struggling, is not to underestimate the power of understanding the process that you're in, which is what Wise Power does. Because having that information is a bit like understanding the weather outside. It's like, okay, so it's winter outside. Now, if I were to go outside without any clothes on, the suffering I'm going to experience is going to be extreme. But if I know it's winter, the way I can care for myself is going to completely change the kind of experience I'm having. And this is the other piece that's really important. This is the other message that's not out there, which we're rectifying, is that you require a very different set of circumstances and rules that you live by when you're in menopause. Because of the nature of the experience, you can't go about life like you used to, and you can't take your self-care for granted anymore. So the moment you realize, there's an adaptation required and what that adaptation is, those self-care things that you do go such a long way to easing, whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever it is you're up against. The self-care is profound, makes a huge difference. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your part of getting fit for menopause.
Yes.
Which covers so much of that as well, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Very valuable. Without wanting to spoil the sort of grand finale of the book, the 5 alchemical capacities of menopause is genuinely magical, where everything just comes together and all the messiness that we have to go through kind of reveals itself in this almost unicorn-like fashion. How did you come to define the alchemical capacities?
Well, it all comes back to keeping a fidelity with my lived experience. Firstly, from Menstrual Cycle Awareness, but particularly, and this is what Sjanie and I have dived into very deeply, is what we call the 5 chambers of menstruation was our starting place. So in our book, Wild Power, we describe the spiritual opening that happens at menstruation and the 5 chambers, the 5 stages, if you like, the 5 elements of that. So we've been living into that. So from that, when I came into my menopause, I saw that my process, I had been tutored in it through the 5 phases of menstruation. That held something. So that was sort of my guide initially for myself of holding on to what I had learnt from my bleeds each month. And how I die each month, my ego gets a puncturing and I kind of lose my mind for a while and I don't want to move. I just want to surrender and give in and do nothing and, get away world. And then how this awakening happens, how I suddenly feel filled with, visioning and love and amazing, and this kind of cosmic energies that come in. So that was my template, if you like, although in menopause it happens over 2 or 3 years of all this process, so it's not neat and tidy. So we started teaching those 5 phases, and so I've been running these workshops, and Sjanie's been joining me we've been running them for about 9 or 10 years now, I think, haven't we, Sjanie? And you've been sort of with me for the last 5 years or so, really working it. So listening to stories, really dreaming into the work. And it's all about this listening in and listening in.
What Alexandra and I are kind of really curious about, and this is sort of how we came to name them. So just picking up from where Alexandra left off, with any spiritual awakening, whilst it's something that's happening to us and, not of our own volition or choosing, what is required is for us to meet the experience in a very particular way for it to transform us, for the gold, for the awakening to really integrate into our beings. And so when we were listening to people's stories as well as our own, my menstruating experience and Alexandra's menopause, we were very curious, like, what does it take to meet these different places in menopause? And that's what these alchemical capacities are. They're, in a way, what the process is demanding of you or asking of you. It's the psychological, spiritual muscle that you need to exercise in order to grow the power that's wanting to come through you. And I'm so glad to hear you appreciating that, because we feel so pleased with how that's all landed, the originality of it, but also the potency of it. When we teach this in our Great Awakener online course, people are it's so activating for them to learn these skills and practice them and then experience actually what happens in their being when they meet themselves and their circumstance in this way. It's very exciting.
I just want to say that they're really hard won.
They are hard won.
It's really taken us time to really go, how do we grow into this power? What is required, So it's been this deep fidelity, really, to the process of our experiences, but the experiences of the story, from the stories that we were hearing.
Do you have any final parting pearl of wisdom?
Yes, you need space and time at menopause. You can't do this and normal life simultaneously. Yeah, rest. Much as you can.
Yeah.
Sjanie?
I will just join in and say how we want to sanctify rest at menopause, that it isn't a cop-out or shameful or laziness at all. It is absolute medicine, and it is exactly what the psyche, soul, body needs at this time. It's the thing. Yeah, so really just sanctifying it for everyone.
Thank you both so much for your time today. It has been a real joy meeting you.
Thank you, Hetty.
Thank you so much.
Really
Hetty.
lovely
It's
conversation.
been a real pleasure.
Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will be in touch very soon.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. You can find Alexandra and Sjanie on Instagram at red.school, on their website, redschool.net, and Wise Power is available now, either from redschool.net or in all the usual places. Read it. It will awaken the goddess inside you. If you need support, please get in touch directly, hattie@realmenopausetalk.com, or go to menopausesupport.co.uk, and indeed the Samaritans are available 24 hours a day. Please remember to follow us on the podcast app of your choice. Feel free to sign up to the newsletter so that you are always up to date. Go to realmenopausetalk.com, scroll down and just click subscribe. Leave us a review wherever you can. It genuinely makes a difference. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.